hopefully so that a fool wouldn't err therein. And not that there's any fools here, except myself, perhaps, at times. So, where do we begin? I guess there's a lot that's been coming down the pike over the last 2 weeks. Actually, I think the last call we had was 2 weeks ago tomorrow, which would be Sunday, that we actually posted. Although we've had a few, the words continued to come. We had tried to get one of the words posted a few days ago and just haven't got to it, but we will post it by tomorrow morning, which is where this word is going to springboard from, and that word is called the next step. So we're definitely writing the last chapters, and it's becoming more and more evident that the way is becoming more clear. There's no doubt. So, Lord, we draw your anointing and clarity. Lord, let the word free us some more. Lord, we need just to take a good shower. In fact, Lord, help us right now before we even start this call. Lord, give us all a spiritual shower right now. We just clean off from the week, clean off from the day, break any lingering contacts, bonds, or anything that would be dogging anyone's trail, so to speak. We just clean off, Lord, and we give it all to you. And we draw the clarity, Lord, of what you want to convey here. And that's good enough for me. So we were dealing with the issue of the rule of the rod of iron and what the Lord is moving us into progressively. And I knew that the following week would be very interesting, and it was, and the week last week as well have been very interesting in what is unfolding. There have been different appearings that have come over the last 10 days, and it just reminds me of something that the Lord spoke a number of times. And, as much as I would love to hear another word, it's one that, we have to embrace. And it was something he spoke many years ago to us. And we were going through, a number of things. And the Lord said, don't look for me in the easy way out, because that's not where I'll be. I'll be in the hard way. And, everyone's looking for a rapture, whether it's a rapture in the sense of the mainstream Christianity definition of rapture, or whether it's a rapture redefined by those reaching for sonship, who are just believing that, Lord, I'm here, I'm tarrying, I'm waiting, just, do it. As if it's going to happen like it did with the disciples on the day of Pentecost. And, so this one experience just happened and birthed the day of the church age. And yet, what we see happening doesn't seem to line up with that. I mean, I would like that. I've really looked to the Lord about that. But how he is bringing things to pass lines up with the book of Revelation, with the overcomers. And it redefines what an overcomer is. And it's like everything is being redefined right now. And you open your mouth and you speak a word, and you realize even as the word comes out of your mouth that God is redefining everything. You get these glimmers, and you realize, that how you have seen things have been in the day of the partial. How I have seen things has been in the day of the partial. We're coming out of the day of the partial. And so where does that lead us? It leads us into the day of fulfillment. But it's also the time that God is redefining everything. And so you should expect, and I know I am expecting, that everything is going to do a 180 degree on us, or a 360, or however we want to define it, in how we perceive our reality and how we perceive the provision and how we perceive ourselves and the Lord, etc. And there's those moments, as I mentioned earlier, where you'll be speaking and all of a sudden you'll get a quick glimmer and you realize that you're treading in waters that are a lot deeper than just your ankles. When you're up to your neck in water. How's it go in Ezekiel 48? A river that couldn't be forded, 47 actually. The waters that would flow from the house, if you guys remember that vision. And it really speaks about the flow of the word that's coming and is going to come. So what we're going to do here tonight, I don't know how organized this is going to be. This is just going to be a warrior meeting, a tracking meeting. We're just going to do a little brain dump here and talk about various things that are happening, and we'll share, some things that are happening with us as well. But, the vision out of Ezekiel is interesting because, it first starts as a small trickle, just a little teeny river. And then as the vision unfolds, the river flows to the ankles, to the thighs, and until it becomes a river that cannot be forded. And it really speaks of the word that's coming and that will come now out of the sons. And eventually what happens to that river? Well, the river in Ezekiel 48 becomes that which begins to feed and sustain the nations. And I know that we realize to a certain degree that there has been such a flood of darkness into the earth for such a very long time. And there's been a progressive restoring of the light, but far too few that have really stood and spoken that word to counter the flood of darkness into the earth. But all that's changing now. And it really is the vision of Ezekiel 47. Because the word is coming through the sons that is going to change everything from that which has been a downward pull in the earth to that which has been, so the earth plane has been so heavily inundated with darkness that, there has to be that which turns the tide. And yet, unless you have eyes to see, you won't even understand what we're talking about. You'll look about you and say, what do you mean? I don't see any darkness. There's some wars and some things going on, maybe some odd movies, but no real perception. And that's really what exists in the world. Everything's pretty fine. And they don't realize, how great a flow of darkness has been coming into the earth and has continued to come into the earth. And the only thing that begins to change that direction is that the word of light begins to be spoken and changes the flow. I believe it's in the book of Zechariah. I'm not sure. Could be Amos. I'm not sure about that. But there's a point. There's a point. We haven't hit that point, but there's a point where the pull in the earth ceases to be a downward pull, and it begins to be an upward pull. Right now, that everything is very downward driven, but it will change as the word continues to flood back into the earth that counteracts the deception and the evil and the darkness. And that, indeed, is what's going to trigger a change from the downward flow into an upward flow. It just doesn't happen that all of a sudden, you go to the next month and there's an upward flow happening. It happens because the word comes that begins to stem the tide of darkness and change it. So what we have been tracking on the last couple of weeks has been really understanding what it's taking to enter into this breakthrough of sonship. As much as like I said at the beginning, as much as I would just like to, think it's just going to happen, and one day we're going to get up and it's just all going to change. It changes incrementally, and that's how it's been. That's how it's always been. It doesn't mean that the only difference is that the changes are happening more frequently and more rapidly. So it's not taking as long. But it's still something that has to be walked out individually. In fact, one of the things the Lord spoke a few days after the word on Sunday, a couple of weeks ago, was that the breakthrough was coming, and at first would be heralded in by 2 or 3. And then what would follow would be individual breakthroughs of those who've been prepared. So in one respect, you might say it's a wave, because we've seen that before, but it's not just some wave that's just going to happen and just go out there and grab anybody and bring them into the kingdom. It really is by virtue of those who've been prepared and are ready. And so that's what really determines it. It's like going back and redefining the timetable of the Father. Who knows the timetable of the Father? Not even the Lord. You can say, well, when is the acceptable time? And we've talked about that before, and it really all has to come down to the preparation of men's hearts. That determines the timetable for each of the sons to break through. But once the door has been shoved down, really broken through, then everything changes. We're not talking about just going through, year after year, month after month. We're talking about a door that gets opened, and to really, to understand that's really what we're doing. But I tell you, at times I feel like the way that we've been approaching it is with our head. You'd think, let's just kick the door down, but it seems like we go and we try and butt the door down, and it doesn't seem to work too well. But just try and imagine for a second with me, because this is where we are, and this is what we're in the midst of. Imagine the door finally getting open. Once the door is open, the provision is then available, attainable, and you can walk it out. Until the time of Pentecost back in the Old New Testament, that, well, no one even knew what that provision was, but that breakthrough opened the door to something that then became available for, the next millennia, for people to break into a walk with God. And of course, at the time of Azusa Street, around 1901 or 1907, back in that area, something happened as well, and ushered in another layer of availability to change and to come alive and to become. But once again, that door had to get open. And so what we're doing collectively and individually is pushing the door. And that was the word that came to us so many years ago. And the Lord just said, it's all an illusion, and it's going to give way, but you have to keep pushing against the door of illusion. You don't buy into it, you don't accept it, but just understand what you're dealing with. And, and just keep pushing. And what we've been, one of the crosses that we've died on for quite some time now, until I had to really put it on the shelf, big time, was the Lord began to speak this word back in 1980. 85, 1986, 1987. And the word was that the kingdom you seek is here. It's right here. It's right here. You can take it now. That was the word that came to us. And threw us into groaning upon groaning. It was like, you believe it in your heart. And it's like, how do you bring it to pass? And yet back at that time, 24 years ago or so, 23, whatever, 22, 20, that was the word. It's here now. It's right at your fingertips. Just push, push, push. And you can say, well, Lord, the woman can push 9 months, but, it's got to be a delivery here, Lord. And we're pushing for what now? 22 years? That's a long 9-month period. But it's the kingdom is, the breakthrough that we're looking for has been available, that I'm aware of, since that time. And yet we've been going through deeper and deeper levels of preparation, because it's one thing for the Lord to say it to you, but it's another thing for you to see it for yourself. Because this whole issue of the kingdom coming is predicated entirely on one thing. You have to see it, to embrace it. And when we started talking earlier here, I was referencing moments of time that you begin to just see a glimpse of something. And you realize that your paradigm is out of date, and it's a challenge, but you have to continue to tell yourself, what you see is not real, and you have to be, to really understand that there's so much more here to grasp and to understand than we've seen, and not to just get comfortable and just just in your mind just kind of just continue moseying along here. The key is the breakthrough by virtue of what you're able to see, and that's always been the case. So what began to come a few weeks ago had to do with taking the next step. And the Lord began to talk to us about the top down versus the bottom up. And everything that he's been doing in preparing us has been in bringing us through what I would call the bottom-up process, where you're breaking your bonds, your contacts, your paradigms, your opinions, your everything. Almost that which defines you to a great degree, and just taking it and flushing it and letting him begin to redefine. And that was what he had spoke to us 20 years ago. He says, okay, you need to let go. And he says, I'm going to begin to tell you what's real and what's not real. And, oh, but Lord, this is real, this is real. No, that's not real. It's only real because you've accepted the illusion. And so therefore, it's taken a certain form of reality. But the minute you realize that it's just an illusion, the power that illusion has wielded over you will be gone in an instant. And you will move in the authority of a son. And so, that's always been an ongoing challenge, to stop looking at everything and drawing a conclusion that what you see and feel and hear and read is real, when it really is not. It's just a fabrication. And so, in this process, in the last several weeks, I remember a connection with a group, and I told them, I said, this has been the most intense warfare that we've ever experienced. And it has. The last 2 weeks has been the most intense conflict that we've seen. The most resistance and so on and so forth. Nothing new. And part of it as well has to do with the fact that living in both worlds simultaneously is not a cakewalk. And I'm sure that all of you are realizing that. You'd say, well, really sounds great. I'm going to be, picking up this sign and that sign. I'm going to see this, hear that, whatever. And it certainly has its benefits. But walking in two worlds at the same time, as we are being thrust into this, is making it progressively more and more difficult to function in the natural plane. Because the energies that you're carrying, the conflict that you're in the midst of, everything is having a dynamic upon your physical body that you haven't been this way before. We haven't been this way before. We haven't really understood. But I recall, following that Sunday word on the rod of iron, which would explain exactly why the resistance has been as great as it's been. Because this is the time of the rod of iron. And it's certainly not going to be welcomed with open arms. There has definitely been a great deal of resistance to it. But what we've seen, and we kind of covered it in the word, the next step, which will get posted. But it had to do with the subsequent layers being removed from within your ability to see. And you might say, well, this sounds similar. We've heard this word before. We've been down this path before. But it's not the same. It's not the same as it's been. So how do I define to you why it's different? I don't know how I can tell you. I just know it's different. There is something that's happening internally where the light is coming on. If you remember in that Sunday evening word, we talked about flipping the switch. It was a word that came many years ago. We get to that point where you can get that breakthrough deep enough, and you get the switch flipped, and the events in the earth are going to just cascade and happen simultaneously. Boom, 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 boom. But someone has to break through and flip the switch. That was the word that came 25 years ago. And Anne was kind enough to draw to my attention well, where is the switch? Who is the switch? You realize the sons are the switch. It's not some switch we're looking for in a dark room with a flashlight. Where's that switch? I'm going to flip that sucker. No, the switch is within each of the sons, and it's predicated upon the light coming on within them. That's the precursor to flipping the switch. And we've always said that once the breakthroughs of resurrection life come, then the events that God has ordained in the earth and the judgments are going to happen fairly rapidly. Now, I'm not going to define what rapidly means in this content, but it's going to begin to move in succession. And we haven't quite seen that. We're right. It's almost like looking on the horizon and you see this massive storm front coming in, but it hasn't hit yet. The storm front are the sons of God coming into their awakening. But the minute the switch is flipped within themselves, then the game changes completely. Here again, we're still coming to grips with how much our internal dynamic and what we are affects everything on the face of the earth. But it is what it is. And so the word which came about 2 weeks ago, roughly, maybe a week and a half ago, had to do with the fact that the light is coming on now. And as it begins to come alive within you, that is going to give you leverage to begin to move into speaking the word. Because it all has to do with ruling and reigning with the rod of iron and bringing, down the kingdoms that have been set against, what God is doing. And so going back to what I was mentioning a few minutes ago, we have been approaching all of this from what I would call a bottom up. God for years has been working on us to clean house, to separate ourselves from that which is unclean, that he might be a father to us and we might be his sons and daughters. It's just no fair weather. This doesn't qualify fair weather Christians. Just because you love God and believe in God, don't mean. It means a little bit, certainly, but it's not sonship. It's not the relationship that he's ordained to happen. Because typically, the Christian world is clueless. They've got no understanding. When you say, well, come out of her, and I'll be a father to you, and you'll be sons and daughters, they'll say, well, yes, Lord, we're out of the world. We're out of the world, but they don't understand. And so we've been coming out of the world on a much deeper plane. But it's what we call the bottom up. Now what's happening? Now what's happening is something a little bit different. Because I saw, and I referenced this in a word that we briefly posted, but I saw the various realms that exist in the Father's kingdom, and there were too many to mention. Some that you could say, well, this is the realm of music, the realm of, different realms that exist within the earth plane. But there are so many realms in the Father's house that we don't even know how to define what they are because they're not even in the scope of our present reality. And I saw that the way we're going to move forward, which is also an explanation of why this week or two has been unusual, is that we begin to move with an authority over the realms that exist in the Father's house. Not even the principalities and powers. This is even beyond them. But in the realms, because every realm belongs to the Lord, belongs to the Father, and every realm has been perpetrated and permeated by darkness and evil. And as the sons begin to take dominion, it starts from the top down. We begin to take dominion over the realm of finance or the realm of government or the realm of time even. And as that begins to happen, the waterfall effect will begin to affect the principalities and the powers, thrones, dominions, and so on and so forth. So we're not going to go in, working up. We're going in from the top, and it's going to trickle down as we begin to move into the authority. And I saw very clearly that the first step in that has been taken already, but I don't yet know what realm it was that was taken dominion over. But the first of many realms has already been brought under a judgment. And so there is a major shift happening. And I'm yet to understand which realm that is that God has brought us to. But here again, the word began to come, to they that are faithful with a little, I will give them much. He who's faithful to rule over one city, I'll give him 10. Well, what's happening in the illumination within us, the light coming on, is that we're not waiting for the whole thing to happen, because it's not going to happen that way. As God begins to turn the light on, and this is more than just revelation. This is something, you could say it's akin to waking up. But as this begins to progressively happen, you take that and you begin to speak the word. Because as the light comes on, you begin to realize who you are, what you are, and all of the provision that you have. And you literally don't have to accept a thing. And nothing can withstand that which you begin to create. As that breaks through, even if it's a small glimmer, but you see it for an instant, you realize what you have. And you begin to just exercise that, even if it's a widow's mite. Lord, I only saw it for a moment. I only have a little bit. But you begin to stand and speak the word. It doesn't work just by having it in your mind. You've got to speak the word, and you begin to take authority. You begin to take dominion. And then God will continue to increase it. And it seems that we're in this process of transformation, but at this point anyway, it's in this type of a process. And I believe that as the Lord continues to bring judgment from the top down, that we will hit a point here where that which is restrained will be fully removed, and we'll hit a point where it's like you don't need to go the whole way, but you hit a point where you change the balance, and then the resurrection life can fully happen. But in the process, we're coming alive even more so as the light continues to be illuminated. But a lot of it is just letting go of our past paradigms and our past perceptions of limitation. Because once you realize you don't have to accept any of the warfare, any of that which has been restraining, then it has no choice but to leave. But it has to be something that you see. You see within yourself, and the light comes on. It's not something that we approach mentally and say, well, I understand, and I'm just going to do this. It doesn't really work until that light comes on. Even just a small part of the switch gets flipped. And, that's what we're leaning into. That is the step that we're facing. The next step into resurrection life is coming as we take what God is doing in restoring the level of light and walk in it, and begin to take the authority over the realms and kingdoms of this age. And it might sound, like we're just a flea on an elephant's back. What can this flea possibly do? But he's on the elephant's back, the Lord. And we just have to be obedient to just take what we get and run with it and exercise, and not be surprised if you don't do that and you say, well, nothing's happening, because it's tied into the fact that you've got to walk in it. In many ways, it's like the Lord's tied our hands and arms and legs and feet. And He's only given you one thing, a mouth. You're not going to be able to hold a gun and shoot anything and wield a sword. All you can do is speak the word. And that's the only defense and offense that the sons have at this point, is the word they speak out of their mouth. And the effectiveness of that word is predicated upon how much the light has come on, that has revealed to yourself who you are and what you are. I know that Ann and I were talking the other day that what's coming is going to be an interesting situation in the earth, because the sons, as they begin to break into this complete transformation of resurrection life, it's going to be but a small handful, comparatively speaking, to those who dwell on the face of the earth. And the earth is going to continue to go through many, many things. And the people of this world are going to continue to go through many, many things concurrently and simultaneously with the reality that the sons are walking amongst them in resurrection life. And that will be the case, because at some point you have to kind of, reach outside the box and try and picture what is coming and what's it going to be like. You think, well, resurrection life means all of a sudden there's going to be instantly everything's changed, and or something. I don't know what we imagine, or there's just going to be a nuclear war and just terminate everything. I don't know what we think, but the breakthrough of resurrection life is happening and will happen while life goes on the face of the earth. And it will be very interesting to see how it all unfolds. And I know that the prophecy where is it? It's probably Zechariah. It talks about in the days of the kingdom that they that go up to worship, it will rain upon them, and they that do not, it will not. And it really has to do with the breakthroughs of sonship and how people are going to respond to God or not to God, and that will determine a lot of what's going to happen to people individually. But we're leaning into this, and this is just a little bit of an update. I would love to say, well, we're completely resurrected and we're traveling in the Spirit everywhere. And all I can say is it has felt like, you probably have heard that saying, we've said it before, when your mission is to drain the swamp. How'd it go? Let's see, Anna says, when you're up to your ass in alligators, it can be very hard to remember that your original mission was to drain the swamp. So our mission, drain the swamp. Right now we've got a few alligators, and actually we might be up to our ass in alligators technically, but that's all right, because we're judging them left and right. And I know that with the changes that are happening, and here again, it can be very hard to quantify them because you're living with yourself day in, day out. And it almost takes someone else to look at you and say, don't you realize who you are? But what is happening is a higher level of sensitivity and a higher level of vibration that you're entering into. And consequently, you're becoming much more acutely sensitive to everything around you. I mean, everything. And it's almost like you're in the midst of being revealed because the light coming forth from the sons is beginning to manifest. And the sons themselves are in this transition of really accepting and knowing who they are. So while they're in the process of this transition, the light can't be hidden. And so the demons are coming out of every corner you can think of, and they're just coming against you left and right. And God's just sitting back saying, okay, know who you are, realize who you are, and you'll move in authority over them. And so, certainly they've been coming out of the woodwork, but all we're doing is just throwing them into the fire left and right. But here again, you kind of have to walk through this. It's not book learning or theory. It's in the trenches learning. And the more we come out of this transition into this absolute state of knowing, I think the less we'll find the demons and devils coming against us, because it'll be very, they'll realize that their time has come, and they'll go the opposite direction. But right now it seems as though we've seen a great deal of the opposite, which is maybe Satan's last attempt to try and abort the manifesting of the sons of God, but that can't happen. So we'll keep pressing through, and we'll continue to just watch what the Lord's doing and unfolding. I know that He's been talking to us about the times that are coming, and not so much resurrection life concerning us, but what's going to be coming in the world, in the whole realm of chaos and lawlessness, because we're entering into a time that's going to be very much earmarked with lawlessness and chaos, and because that's going to have to come first before order follows after that. So it's coming, and I see it, but as well, it's tied into the manifesting of the sons. And I think that's why He was revealing that to us last night. So Ann and I send our love and blessings to all of you. We'll get this other word posted, like I said, tomorrow, so you'll have a couple of words to take a look at, and we'll see about doing another call here at some point real soon. So we'll go ahead and sign off at this point, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.